Alright, Terrarium update 6-ish or so. I think it's June 6th or 7th today. So I did go ahead and create 2 more little Terraria. I haven't sealed them up yet. These have been about a week and a half. They're mostly the same as this terrarium, except I didn't have quite enough of the monkeygrass really to split up for the littler one, and of course both of them are smaller and therefore hopefully less likely to crack. So it's mostly just garden ivy, a little bit of monkeygrass, a single blade of regular yard grass, and some roly-polies in both of them. And after about 24 hours, all of the roly-polies in this littler one died. So I restocked them, and I think those have probably also died, but it's hard to tell. I tried to capture smaller ones for this, and as a result they're harder to see. You can certainly see plenty of dead ones scattered around in here. So very sad. Actually, that one might be alive. So that's a good sign. But I have been opening them every day for the last 2 weeks to let air in. And the idea behind this is that it should hopefully let everything stabilize, keep the plants from dying out early on, and then they'll only have to adjust to the closed environment after they've already gotten well rooted, which I think is what has been our problem with a lot of these, is that the transplant shock stresses everything out, and then being stuck in a container with no air circulation stresses it out even more, and that kills things that might otherwise have survived. So the plan here is that today I'm going to seal these 2 off, and then we'll take a brief look at everything, although none of the other terrariums have really done much except for this one, which has grown a whole lot. You can see, and I guess this is ivy. The ivy has taken on a little bit of a different look in some places, but there's still plenty of it alive. Still loads of algae on the inside, so it's hard to see what's going on. And then this tree that has sprouted inside has already grown up to the top of the container. I don't have any plans to do anything about that. We're just going to see how it reacts. There's a lot more living in here, but not a ton to point out, especially because the algae makes it really difficult to see anything specific. Although, I guess to point out is, like all of the others, there's a whole ton of soil algae growing in here. The reindeer moss has sort of turned to mush, which is kind of interesting. But everything has survived so far, except maybe the roly-polies. And I think some of these snails are still alive. But again, of course, we're not perfectly sealed up at the bottom down here, so none of that counts. As for these, I think some of these guys are probably still alive. They might be dead now, but we're going to open it up to seal it, so I can give them a poke and see. I've been trying to open this up less and less in the last couple of days, and kind of going along with that, everything has seemed a bit more lethargic, like they move around less often as they get less air. As a result, oh, there's this fly. If the fly's dead, the fly's probably dead. Yeah, it hasn't moved. Probably everything's dead. Should be a shame if it all, yeah. Come on, you guys. Nothing. Nothing. Oh, well, and that wasn't even on camera. See. I think I'll stop this, put one or two more in, and then continue. Okay, captured a couple more little ones. They're basically just juvenile isopods. I'm going to throw them in this new terrarium as well. Their odds of survival are low, but at least they're small, so they maybe don't need as much air on an individual basis. And it's more established now, there's a little bit more growing in it, so maybe it's generating a bit more oxygen than before. Right. Nice these little guys. Right, so we'll see how well that goes. I think I showed all these off already, so I'll skip that part for now. Just take a real brief look at the other 3 sets of Terraria that we have. Okay, so over here, nothing really remarkable. It's all pretty much the same as last time. Still a little bit more growth going on in here. Exactly the same as every day over here. Maybe a bit more scum working its way up the side of this one, and the mold is still doing its thing over there. This terrarium looks like everything but the algae is starting to die, the onions. I don't know what the onion looks like when it dies, so could be. These are all the same. This is very thoroughly dead looking. Nothing going on in here. Plenty of algae growing, but I'm still kind of surprised that nothing has sprouted up in there. And then that terrarium, as usual, nothing really remarkable. And I think we'll look at the indoor ones after this. Okay, here we are indoors where I'm a little more comfortable talking because my neighbor can't hear me being real weird. So these we haven't taken a look at in, I don't know, a month or so, and there's still virtually nothing to be seen in most of them. These two are pretty much dead. This one, however, does have a nice healthy growth of algae and stuff going on over here. So, it's not all dead. That's basically the only thing to say about these. One of them is still alive. And it's really just the algae, which, as we've seen a couple times now, is the most robust thing that I can grow. Just kind of make me think it might be we're trying to make one that's like all algae. But I don't know if I can make anything interesting there, or if it would just be a jar full of scum. But even indoors, one of them at least has got some life. And in fact, it might be interesting to try to inoculate these with a little bit of algae or something and see if they, you know, can at least do this. Actually, I probably ought to get a little bit more close up so you can see a little more detail. It's growing in around the rocks. It's growing in amongst this dead lichen, which is not... Lichen itself hasn't really done anything, but the algae has, so that's nice. And some of it's even made its way down into the substrate, although not very much, and it seems to have brought a little bit of lichen with it. Or for that matter, it could actually be a piece of living lichen that's kind of reproduced down there. Yep, so that's it for in here. Well, now we'll take a look at the outdoor ones. Okay, so we're back here outside with these dead terraria. Let's to look at them and more to talk about what I want to do next. So these did really great until summer came and heated them all up to, 120 or 140. I think we checked that out in one of these update videos, maybe update 2 or 3, I think, for the Terrarium 2.0 ones. And they were getting over 120 degrees inside, which is probably too hot for these plants, especially because, respiratory cooling probably doesn't work very well when the water can't actually evaporate and go anywhere. I think that's why, well, this one died on its own, but this one was flourishing, and it's, I don't know, conceivably not completely dead, but only conceivably. I suspect it is. And in the base we see some red stuff, which I think is like some kind of extremophile bacteria or something that can survive 120 degrees without a problem, and now that everything else has been killed off, it gets to rule the roost. So what I want to do is create another set of terraria similar to these, well, less similar to these and more like these 2.0 or 2.01 or whatever you want to call these two that I just produced, except with little sunshades on the south side, so they get protected from the worst of the heat, because we've seen in the shade it's usually 10 or 20 degrees cooler. And I suspect that those will do fine during the summer, but the real experiment will be when the winter comes and the sunshade is still there, preventing them from getting light, and they don't really need the extra cooling, whether they survive and prosper, or whether they kind of die out like the indoor ones did. And I don't know the answer to that question because we haven't done it yet. And I think that ought to be the next step.